Everybody, welcome in to Go with the Flow, presented by RS Andrews. My name is Brandon Adams. Happy to have Dari Payro from RS Andrews with us, along with the rest of our Dog Nation team, Mike Griffith, Jeff Sintel, Connor Riley, as we make our picks for what, up to this point in time, is the biggest Saturday of the college football season, deep in the SEC, big top 25 matchup outside the SEC there as well. You certainly get the impression the calendar has now turned to October, and the games themselves get a lot more exciting. And Dari, I'm sure you've seen kind of the same thing there. As you kind of look ahead to this Saturday, it feels like there have been some weeks we've been almost kind of struggling to find 7 or 8 games worth picking. Not an issue here this week. Intriguing games around the SEC, including think about Georgia, Arkansas, and obviously Alabama, Ole Miss, two of the biggest games of the season here to this point. A lot of fun talking about these games from a point spread standpoint.
No doubt. We got some good slates, some good games on the slate this weekend.
And, of course, good games on the slate for us. We'll talk about all that upcoming. We appreciate our friends at RS Andrews for making it all possible. Of course, they're the ones you turn to for your air conditioning, your heating, your plumbing, electric needs. That means if your water heater goes out, in many cases, RS Andrews can replace it for you the same day. You just need to find them online at rsandrews.com for a lot on that. Story after story, they've been delivering smiles, and they can deliver a smile for you there as well. What I am not smiling about quite so much, the current state of our standings in our season-long contest here on Go with the Flow, presented by RS Andrews. But I will give you a quick update on where all of that is for the moment. First of all, congratulations to Jeff. Last week, 7-0. Now a winning record on the season at 17-15 overall after the perfect mark last week. Connor not too far behind a week ago at 6-1 for last week, at 20-12 on the season. Really pretty good records for a lot of our crew here. Mike still pretty impressive overall, 5-2 last week. Now 21-11 on the season. Dari has got a winning overall record for the year there as well. That's 17-15. That'll get you to the pay window, although just 2-5 last week. I do have a new precinct reporting, and before we continue with the rest of our card here, apparently we had a scoring error a little bit earlier, and Dari Payro's had some new delegates awarded his way. The original tally had him at 2-5 for last week. Dari actually goes 5-2 for last week, which now puts him in a tie at 20-12 on the year with Connor Riley. So let's get an update here on that. And now only, what is that, a game behind Mike Griffith, who's at 21-11 on the year. So quick update on the standings. 5-2 for Dari last week. Tie for second along with Connor at 20-12. Griff just ahead of them at 21-11 on the year. Jeff's at 17-15, and my score standings remain exactly where they were at 15-17. So Dari, your correct total has been factored in now.
Glad that I was able to get straightened out there. Trying to flip flop. That's the only way you guys can win is flip flop my wins and losses.
You got to keep your eye on everything around that, because some of these guys certainly will take advantage of any opportunity they have when it comes to something like that. So that's the standings. And really, honestly, other than me, who has been pretty good on everything but Georgia games, really pretty good records. If I've got 3 people giving you a winning score and a winning record after 4 weeks like this, then folks are making some money if they're paying attention to those picks here thus far, and hope that continues for all of us as the time goes on here. Nonetheless, we will press on. We will charge on with a big slate of games on Saturday, starting with Georgia at noon against the Arkansas Razorbacks. Dogs, a big favorite here at 18.5 points after Georgia's been riding high through its first 4 games. And Arkansas getting a lot of attention for what it's done in the Lone Star State, taking care of the Longhorns in a game that's played in Fayetteville, then going to Jerry World last week and taking down Texas A&M for the first time in 9 tries, 9 straight losses for Arkansas against Texas A&M before getting the victory there last week. 18.5 is the number. Mike, start us off. What do you think?
Yeah, at the start of the week, I was really bullish on Georgia to cover this game. But, with Kirby disclosing yesterday that the JT is now dealing with a lat injury, the fact that Kirby just offered that up was curious. He wasn't even asked specifically about it. He went out of his way to point it out. It almost makes me wonder if we're going to see Stetson Bennett rotate in again. Does that happen early? Is there a preset rotation? That and just the knowledge that Sam Pittman has of the personnel. I think this game's going to be a little lower scoring than maybe I first thought. And therefore, I'm going to take Arkansas to cover. I've got Georgia winning this 30-13.
Can I ask you a question real quick?
Sure.
Does Ty Cobb's family know that you have his hat?
Yeah, no, and I'm wearing his spikes, and I've got a wooden bat in the corner here too. There.
Good stuff all the way around. So I'm sorry, I was so focused on the hat. Give me your pick one more time, real quick. You got Georgia minus the points.
No, I have Arkansas. I'm going to take the 18.5. I've got a 30-13 score.
Thank you very much, Mike. Appreciate that. Jeff, you were perfect last week. Stay hot here with the dogs. What do you think? Minus 18.5.
So, guys, first I got to give a shout out to my colleague, Connor Riley. What's the opposite of rat poison? Maybe rat prime rib? Well, that's what he gave me last week. He was touting me with a horrible performance from the week prior, and we just had to get better at that. Kind of like Ray Goff used to say with the Georgia Bulldogs, we just had to do a better job of that. We did a better job of that. This is a spicy line for me because you look, Arkansas came off a physical game. Georgia came off the complete opposite of a physical game. You got achy breaky quarterbacks a little bit. I think Georgia will cover this game regardless. I think it's going to be a lot of run game, going to be very physical. Better defense is going to rule out in this one. Give me the dogs to cover here. That's 18.5, and I think Georgia will cover that.
Split decision amongst the scribes thus far. Connor Riley break the tie. 18.5 is the number.
Yeah, after giving Jeff a little pep talk last week, maybe I need to give one to BA. I mean, he can spin it all he wants, but at the end of the day, your record is what your record is. And right now he's got a losing record. I like Georgia here. This line is about 3 points too low to me. I think this should be a 21-point spread. And because of that, I'll take Georgia here at 18 or 18.5, wherever the number falls. I think this is a game Georgia wins by 3 touchdowns.
Dog Nation daily listeners and viewers agree with Connor, as you might imagine. They typically like the home team. They like the dogs here. 81% will take the dogs minus the 18.5 points. Obviously, the one thing is if this game is on the wrong side of the point spread for Georgia late, the odds of Kirby punching it in to kind of make it look pretty against a guy that he respects, Sam Pittman, the odds of that are not great. However, in this particular case, I don't think that matters very much. Now, as I told you before, I'm also 0-8 when picking games involving the dogs here this season. So take all of this with a grain of salt. But I do think that Georgia is a lot better than Arkansas, good enough to win this game by 3 touchdowns. I'm not going to overthink it. I'll take Georgia minus the points here, and that puts the flow on the side of the Georgia Bulldogs as well. Dar, you want to go with the flow and take UGA? Big number.
It's a big number. I'm actually going to take Arkansas here. They've been great this year. Georgia's better. They're the better team. I think Arkansas is just going to do enough to kind of hang around that point spread number. And like you said, I just don't think Georgia kind of opens up full throttle late in this game.
Yes, that could very well be the case. I mean, and there's plenty of motivation for that not, to be there for a Kirby. You need to hopefully see Georgia be, as it has been in some of these games recently, so much better in the first half that if you want the Georgia spread and the Georgia cover here, you're going to have to see a lot of that happen in the first half because the idea that they're looking to tack on points late. They may just not be quite as willing to do that. So we're off and running here on Go With The Flow presented by R.S. Andrews today. We'll come back to Georgia, Arkansas before the game is done. I actually have a pretty interesting number on the over-under for Saturday. I will share that with you here coming up in a little bit, and you can decide what you want to do with that. We'll get to the big game in the SEC here in a moment between Alabama and Ole Miss. Before that, though, a stop off in Como, Columbia, Missouri, where Missouri, fresh off a pretty embarrassing loss last week to Boston College, given all the stuff that Eli Drinkwitz said about that game in Chestnut Hill going into it. The fact that he didn't want to play there. I didn't think there was any value from a recruiting standpoint from being in the state of Massachusetts. And then lo and behold, his Tigers go to Chestnut Hill and lost the game on the road in overtime. Not a good look for Missouri. They come back, though, to a spot they've been a lot more comfortable so far during the Drinkwitz era as 3-point favorites against a Tennessee team that is possibly reeling after losing pretty bad to Florida last week. And, of course, having lost to Pitt before that, trying to find themselves potentially making a quarterback switch, going to Hendon Hooker, the Virginia Tech transfer, after Joe Milton, the Michigan transfer, is pretty much the same quarterback he used to be in Ann Arbor. The point here is Tigers -3 at home, hosting a pretty bad Tennessee team. Mike, what you think about your old squad?
What do you mean?
Well, you covered Tennessee for about 50 years.
Yeah. Well, it's just a job, man. I thought they outplayed Florida in the first half last week. I liked Hendon Hooker. I think he's good. I'm starting to wonder a little bit about Eli Drinkwitz. I mean, I know it was a road game, but it was Boston College. And, that there's something that doesn't seem quite right. And I could be overthinking it. But I'm going to take Tennessee to win the game. I'm going to take Tennessee in an upset. I think there was a lot of confidence that came out of, again, it was just the first half, but they outplayed Florida for a half. They actually looked better against Florida than Alabama did in parts of that game. A lot of new guys, a lot of new energy, and a suspicion that something's not quite right with Missouri makes me take Tennessee in this game.
I'd say that relative to expectations, Missouri has been one of the more disappointing teams in the SEC for me thus far through 4 games. The number is 3, Jeff. It is Missouri at home. What do you think about the Tigers and the Vols?
Yeah, I think disappointment and suspicion are 2 good keywords that will describe this game in my mind's eye. I do think Missouri gets a little bit out of playing an undefeated team going into overtime, coming back a little bit, and still what was a disappointing game. Brandon, there's a lot of games that you have this week, especially one later on the card, where I get the feeling you're like Scott Sinclair trying to torture your guys with a lot of these picks. And, man, they're just rubbing right on the line about what you think is going to happen. Here's what I think is going to happen. I think Missouri is going to win the football game. I think both programs are reeling, but Missouri is going to be, at least they're going to be home. I look at which program has more momentum or needs to grab more momentum, and I think that's going to be on the side of the Tigers at home on Saturday. So give me Missouri to win this game outright. I think they're given some points, but I think Missouri is going to win this by about 7 points.
Another split decision amongst our scribes here. Connor, what do you think?
First of all, the disrespect for Boston College on this show is just outright awful. I mean, come on, they're an undefeated team. They took Missouri to overtime with their backup quarterback, and they played really well there.
To be fair, though, hold on before you make your pick. To be fair, my only issue is that if Eli Drinkwitz is going to talk about the fact that he doesn't want to play the game, you got to go up there and win the game after that.
You don't just
losing at Boston College. I have an issue with saying that that the game is beneath you, and then you go up there and lose it.
You don't just walk into Chestnut Hill and come out with a victory here. I mean, come on, have some respect. The ghost of Doug Flutie is hanging around there.
By the way, Boston College Clemson, very interesting game in the ACC on Saturday. Clemson's still about a 2-touchdown favorite, despite the fact they're terrible.
I know I usually leave BA to give you the numbers here. In the last 2 seasons, Tennessee has been an underdog in 7 games. They are 0-7 in those games with an average loss, or in all 7 of those losses are by at least 12 points. I think they go to 0-8 here with another loss to Missouri on the road this week.
No, I think that's a great stat and a great point. Now, 55% of Dog Nation daily listeners and viewers are also on the side of Missouri here, so a little bit of a split decision. People not quite know what to make of Tennessee right now. Here's the thing I'm leaning on. Tennessee was one of my strongest underplays at the beginning of the year, going under 6. I think this is a losing team here this year. And if I'm right about that, and I see no reason to adjust my model on Tennessee as of yet, if I'm right about that, this is the kind of game you lose. For as shaky as Missouri has been thus far this season, this is a team that was really good at home a year ago. Think Kentucky, think LSU. Don't think about Georgia, because that was a counterexample to that for Missouri playing at home last year. But for the most part, in Eli Drinkwitz's first year, they actually found a way to play pretty well in their own stadium there. So I'm going to trust that on Saturday. And I'm going to take the Missouri Tigers here minus the 3 points. That also puts the flow on the side of Missouri as well. Dar, you want to go with the flow and take Mizzou?
Yeah, I'm going to go with the flow. I'm going to take Mizzou. They've been pretty good, like you said, at home over the years. I just trust their offense more than I trust anything from Tennessee right now. So I think they're just going to air it out against Tennessee. And I don't know if the Vols be able to keep up. I don't think they have enough offense.
Yeah, so that's certainly a fun one to watch. But what's even more fun, arguably the biggest game of the day in the SEC, certainly alongside Georgia, Arkansas, is Ole Miss going to Alabama. People know the backstory here. Nick Saban, obviously 23-0 all time against former Saban assistants. Lane Kiffin becomes the next to get a crack at that on Saturday. And last year in Oxford, Mississippi, it seemed like for a while that Ole Miss had a chance to win that game. They moved the football with ease against the Crimson Tide, and a lot of folks think they may do that again thus far this year. They're 3-0 against the spread so far this season. They're covering those games by an average of more than 10 points per contest. So Rebels are riding high. The last time we saw Alabama in a big spot, they were scuffling in a close win and an ATS loss at Florida. But they are 14.5-point favorites at home on Saturday. Mike, Crimson Tide and the Ole Miss Rebels, Alabama minus 14.5. What do you think?
Well, I covered Alabama too, and there was no introduction to that. But
your team, Mike.
Yeah, they're my team too. They're all my team. Everybody, that's my team too. Yeah, and I like the Tide. I do. I think that Nick Saban is a better coach than Ole Miss is Lane Kiffin. Newsflash. Saban 23-0 against his assistants. I think everybody knows that as well. Alabama at home. Everybody gets so excited about the Ole Miss offense, and they forget that they don't know how to play defense. So I'm going to take Alabama in this one, 52-35.
not saying you're wrong on your pick, but through 3 games, this Rebels team is actually playing better defense than they did a year ago and better than I thought they would, especially after the loss of their leading tackler from last year, transfer to Kentucky. But the point is, Jeff Sintel, minus 14.5 with Bama and Ole Miss. What do you think?
And he's on mute, So.
We're about to do
I would say slow your roll, America, right there on Ole Miss. First of all, good job, Connor. You stayed in character there with that Boston accent, even though Brandon kept bantering back and forth with you. You stayed true to your role. I hope everybody.
Oh, is that what he was doing? I thought he had a cold.
No. Hey, Connor, your thespian and talents and your acting skills are lost on this crowd. They're lost on this crowd. I bet my buddy Dari knew what was up. I bet he knew what was up. But back on point, I can think about a million reasons why Alabama's going to win this game. I can't think of about 5 or 6 reasons why Ole Miss will win this game or even stay within 19 points. Defensively, I think you're going to have a better Alabama team. That's what they're saying, more experience, better in the scheme than they were last year when Ole Miss rolled up some 650 yards of total offense. I think Matt Corral is going to come out of this game with a few bruises, and I think Alabama is going to get one of those style points win in the SEC West. I think Alabama covers. I think this is probably a 24 to 28 point win.
There has been some money coming on the Rebels because over the course of the week, the line has moved to get to where it is now, according to BetUS at 14.5 as of press time, as they say in the business. Connor Riley, what do you think? So far, it's all Alabama.
Ole Miss is the most square pick out there this week. They're the hot team, although for everyone rushing to defend Lane Kiffin and inciting he's changed, go look who he hired as his defensive coordinator and why he got fired from Maryland, DJ Durkin there. Someone I personally believe shouldn't be allowed to coach in the college ranks anymore after what happened at Maryland. But I think Ole Miss is going to be able to score enough points. That half point there to get it to 14.5 looms large for me. Wow. Maybe, and again, this got me in trouble last week where everything told me to take Notre Dame, and I took Wisconsin because Mike and Jeff both were smart and took Notre Dame. I'm going to zag here again and give me Ole Miss plus the 14.5 points, even though I hate myself for doing it.
Very surprised about that. Now, of course, Dog Nation Daily listeners and viewers, not quite on your side, but they're a little closer, 58% take Alabama. So there's some love out there for Ole Miss amongst our audience, but I'm pretty surprised about that. This is one of those moments where, I just feel like we've seen this with Alabama so much before. We talked going to the Florida game, at least I did, about the idea of Alabama kind of having that little bit of a letdown spot late September, early October. We cited the examples where that had been true, 2016, 2017, 2018, 2019, to a degree even in 2020 there as well. And what typically happens for Alabama after that, they go on a bit of a roll. This is also that kind of Goldilocks zone where we typically see Alabama covering very easily as between a 2 and a 3 touchdown favorite, especially in those games played in Tuscaloosa. Not a lot of deliberation for me on this. I like Alabama a lot. Jeff a moment ago said 24, 28 points. Certainly 3 touchdowns at least. I see Alabama winning this game very easily. Matt Corral needs to be Johnny Manziel the way that he performed in Tuscaloosa in 2012 to give the Rebels any chance. And I don't quite think that's what Corral is right now. So I'll take Alabama minus the 14.5. That puts the flow on the side of the Crimson Tide. Dar, you want to go with the flow and take Bama?
I am going to go with the flow. I'm going to stick with the formula.
Yeah, and we should let people know. We should let people know that only in rare exceptions you've ever gone against Alabama. And for the most part, that was in a pandemic year when things were weird. But we've done this show now for multiple years. And you have basically sight unseen, price unquestioned, taken Alabama no matter what in almost every instance.
Yeah, this one's a disciplined one because it tests you because Ole Miss racks up a lot of points. Alabama right now, in those other years have had a really good running game, and they're just kind of struggling to run efficiently as they have in the past. I think that really allows them to put a lot of pressure on opposing defenses and offenses by controlling that clock. But hopefully they get it right this week, going back home, and they get a big blowout.
Also in the SEC now, pretty interesting spot in the Commonwealth of Kentucky, Commonwealth Stadium, in fact, Kroger Field at Commonwealth Stadium, as the Kentucky Wildcats, 8.5 point home underdogs hosting Florida. Florida's found the swamp pretty friendly as confines the last couple of weeks, playing Alabama close 2 weeks ago, handling Tennessee, at least by the time the game was done, easily last week, covering the spread there in the process on all of that. Kentucky, no, a little bit of an up and down year. They were closer than they should have been against Chattanooga a couple of weeks ago. They did take care of business in their SEC opener against South Carolina last week. one of the bigger games that have been played in the state of Kentucky in quite some time. You probably have to go back to maybe LSU in 2007, maybe even longer than that to find a game. Maybe the 2018 Georgia-Kentucky game, I guess, comes to mind there a little bit too. But certainly a big spot at night with Kentucky hosting Florida, 8.5-point home underdogs here in this spot. Mike, what do you think about Kentucky and Florida here?
Well, first of all, Mullen punched in a touchdown in the last few minutes, and Tennessee was in the red zone when time ran out. So they didn't easily cover in that game.
Great teams cover. Great teams cover.
Well, Dan Mullen always scores those last points, and he's going to do it to Kentucky. Kentucky is a strong physical team, but they kind of struggled against South Carolina. They only covered by 1 point against the South Carolina team that's, frankly, mediocre. I'm going to take the Gators. I think the last time Kentucky beat Florida in Lexington, I don't know if Connor's parents had even met. It was like 1986 or 1987.
They were married.
Were they married? Okay. You older kids. Well, it was a long time ago, and that streak is going to continue. I'm going to take the Gators to win and cover in Lexington.
Jeff, what do you think? 8.5 is the number here.
I think the Gators are going to win. I think they're going to cover by about 17. I yield the rest of my time to Connor Riley and his next. Maybe he's got a Lexington or a Florida Gator impersonation. I want to hear if he's got it. Connor, I yield the floor to you, my man.
Boy, y'all are making this too easy. I'm just telling you right now. Be very, very careful. Connor, what do you think?
Yeah, I can pick up what BA's putting down here. I can't really do much of a Kentucky accent. Those Ohio's, northern Kentucky's are a little tough for me.
It's a tricky one, right? That's a tricky one.
Yeah, it's a tricky one. Look, I hate myself for this. And if I were picking first like Mike was, I probably would have picked Florida here. I have some major questions about this Kentucky offense and Will Levis. But because Jeff and Mike both feel so strongly here, and because it's an 8.5-point home dog, give me Kentucky. I don't feel great about it. I'm going to be so upset with myself this time next week when Florida comes in and wins by 2 touchdowns, because Kentucky, a similar square pick here, but give me Kentucky plus 8.5.
66% of Dog Nation Daily listeners and viewers, they agree they never take Florida. So that's not a huge surprise there on that. And here's the thing. If I'm going to be wrong, what side do I want to be wrong on? I'd rather sell a week too soon on Florida than a week too late. I was emphatic in taking the Gators to cover against Alabama. Turned out to be right. Emphatic last week, taking the Gators to turn out to cover against Tennessee, and it turned out to be right, even if it took the full 60 minutes to get there on that. I want to see what happens on the road here. I want to see what happens to a Kentucky team against a Kentucky team that, and Mike touched on this a moment ago, this has not been the prettiest season thus far. Too close against the Mocs. The game against South Carolina was certainly not a thing of beauty. But I will give you one number that argues for Kentucky a little bit. Georgia's first in the country right now. Todd Furman, the gambling expert, put these numbers out this week. Georgia's first in the country right now when it comes to net yards per play. That's the total of your offense, net yards game, minus what you give up on defense. Georgia's net yards per play difference is 3.9 right now. Kentucky's second in the country behind only Georgia at 3.3. That's better than Ohio State, who's third on that list right now, and better than Arkansas, who's fourth at a total of 3 net yards per play. So from that standpoint, this is a Kentucky team that is better offensively than they have been, kind of running a Sean McVay style deal with Will Levis there at quarterback. And yeah, as usual, pretty physical and typically pretty good there on defense. I think Kentucky has a chance to win this game with a loud home crowd with a Florida team in unfriendly territory for the first time this season. Could they make it close? Yeah, I think it's worth taking a flyer to say that they might. I'll take Big Blue here. And that puts the flow on the side of Kentucky after a pretty hot start for the Gators with our picks. The flow ends up being there on Big Blue Nation. Dar, you want to go with the flow and take the Wildcats?
I don't. This is a tricky line. I think it's a tricky one, but I'm gonna take Florida here. It should be an interesting game, kind of foreshadowing to see how Florida's rushing attack goes against Tennessee's rushing defense. I'm kind of curious to see how that plays out. I mean, Florida's averaging over 300 yards per game running the ball over these past few games. They're rolling right now. I think in this game, Kentucky's probably going to turn the ball over a handful of times more, than Florida does, and that'll probably be the difference in covering of this game.
Can I just say that after learning that BA is also taking Kentucky, I feel even worse about my pick now.
No way. No way. You're free to change it if you want to, but listen, you got nobody to blame but yourself if you do.
Brandon's not taking Kentucky. He's going against Florida. That's kind of like that's kind of like Dari with Alabama. Brandon's going to kick the Gators anytime he can. That's what it is.
But in fairness, I did take Florida 2 weeks in a row and went to the pay window both times. So we shall see on that. A team that has not been as fortunate for me, that's the Texas A&M Aggies, who get a chance to host Mississippi State on Saturday. Of course, folks saw A&M lose to Arkansas this past Saturday for the first time. 9 consecutive wins for A&M went by the wayside against Arkansas this past week. It's one of the ugliest performances of the year. Really no offense to speak of for the Aggies here at this point, but things for Mississippi State may be even worse. Mississippi State lost 2 weeks ago because of some bad officiating against Memphis, but no one to blame last Saturday against LSU other than themselves. This team that can't run the football right now, they're not playing a ton of great defense seemingly either. They're 7-point underdogs on the road to Texas A&M on Saturday. What do you think about the Aggies hosting the Bulldogs on Saturday, Mike? Texas A&M a 7-point favorite.
Yeah, I can give you 9 million reasons why A&M is going to win and cover. 28-20, Texas A&M.
Jeff, what do you think?
Odd year with Mike Leach and everybody. Mike Leach's team can stop the run. They can't really throw the ball at all, especially moderate, medium-sized passing. I think Kyle Field, a nastiness in A&M's mouth from last week in Arkansas. They played a really tough Arkansas team. I don't know if people look to that. A really well-built, formulaic Sam Pittman Arkansas team. I still like A&M to win this game. I think they'll cover, and I think they'll be able to puff their chests out a little bit in College Station on Saturday night after this one.
Connor, what you got?
Against Power 5 opponents this year, Zach Calzada has a yards per attempt of 4.8. That is horrendous.
Yeah.
Having said that, I think I'm going to take Texas A&M here. It feels kind of like a sucker pick, but I lack the courage to take Mike Leach and know what I'm going to get from this Mississippi State team on a week-to-week basis.
If only they still had KJ Costello, Connor.
Hey, I mean, look, did it against LSU last year. He's good for one great game a year.
Dog Nation, daily listeners and viewers, we have a lot of close split decisions amongst our audience right now. Just 51% on the side of Texas A&M here. A lot of folks kind of questioning the Aggies right now. Some of that's probably directed towards me, who's talked up Texas A&M a lot during the offseason. I have been frequently wrong. And you mentioned Costello from a year ago. The truth is, quarterback with Will Rogers, I don't necessarily think that's been the problem for Mississippi State. It's all the other things that Mike Leach is not very famous for that are not showing up in Starkville right now. And this is simply a matter of my pride being on the line. Connor's right. You know, I'm not going to take the L on my initial proclamations about Texas A&M because they're not the same team without their original starting quarterback, Haynes King. Calzada has really, really struggled. But I mean, Mississippi State's the worst team in the SEC West. Jimbo Fisher's got to be in position right here. I will take Texas A&M. That puts the flow on the side of the Aggies there too. Dari, are we overestimating what Texas A&M can do offensively after what they've shown you so far this week? You want to go with the flow? Take the Aggies here?
No, I'm not. I'm taking Mississippi State again. Ooh.
Wow.
Okay, you look at the game against LSU, it was 3 blown coverages on 3 long touchdown plays. It's a difference in that game. It's the same thing that happened in Memphis. There's a few blown plays that lead to big things, but when you eliminate those things, they actually played a better game. I trust them and their offense and their passing, which Will Rogers is averaging, 75+% accuracy. You know, they're struggling running the ball, but A&M struggling with any kind of offense. So I'm going to trust Mississippi State to score enough points. And again, all their games have been close. So I think this is another close game. Probably gives Texas A&M a scare at home. Texas A&M probably ekes it out at home because their defense is way better, and they're probably going to make some plays late. But I like Mississippi State to cover here. I'm going back with them again.
Good stuff there from Dari Payro, who's been on the Maroon a lot so far.
Hey, Brandon, let me jump in on something. We got a lot of Zach Calzada slander here across this cover 4, and I love the stats you guys both brought out. I'm going to tell you this: the young fella's going to get better. When I think of Zach Calzada, I think one of the 5 strongest arms I've ever seen out of a high school recruit. He could spin it, and certainly that pedestrian. What's lower than pedestrian? Maybe Vanderbilt's offense. What's lower than pedestrian? that 4.8 yards per attempt is going to get better. And I know I did not get a check from the Calzada family for saying that.
We appreciate you dropping that in nonetheless, though. We'll certainly watch that. Hopefully, if you're an Aggies backer, that happens this Saturday against Mississippi State. Next game in the SEC West, LSU hosting Auburn, two somewhat traditional rivals here. Of course, the number that almost everyone now has become aware of. Auburn trying to win in Death Valley for the first time since 1999. That's a number that's hung over this Auburn program's head for quite a while. LSU last week was on the winning side against Mississippi State. Auburn had to struggle late and pull it out against Georgia State, and then promptly fired its wide receivers coach, Cornelius Williams, a move that has been quite controversial on the Plains this week, even drawing the ire of former Auburn assistants who've weighed on that pretty heavily. I don't mind watching that. I got to tell you, I don't mind watching the soap opera unfolding there at Auburn on all of this. The point is, LSU is a 3.5-point home favorite against Auburn. Mike, what do you think? Tigers versus Tigers here.
Well, I covered Auburn. That was my team back in 19. Yeah, I did. That was my first SEC beat. So I'm going to say I'm really tempted to take Auburn with the bounce back here. I really am because, as Dari pointed out, LSU wasn't that impressive. But I just, nighttime game against Ed Orgeron, backs to the wall. I'm going to take LSU to win and cover it begrudgingly, even though I think Auburn would be a smart pick. I'm going to go with LSU because I think Connor's going to take Auburn.
I love the chess match back and forth between various people here right now. Before we find out,
it's a fight at the top. It's a fight at the top between Mike, Dari, and I, and so we got to make up any ground we can.
Before we find out what Connor's pick is, Jeff, let's let you go and give us your thoughts on LSU and Auburn here.
Speaking of a fight at the top, there's going to be another name getting closer to the top after this pick gets settled on Saturday. I'm curious to see what kind of role Mr. Finley plays in this game. I'm hoping nobody on this panel will take the sucker puns and say anything about I got the Tigers winning or somebody's going to party like it's 1999. I just think LSU, if they can do one thing, they can rush the passer, they can defend the pass out on the edge. I don't like what's happening at Auburn right now. You get Tiger Stadium, you get Death Valley. That's a tough formula to win. I'm going to take LSU to win this game. I think they'll win. I think they'll win by about 7 points. So I like them in this one.
Connor, what do you think?
Yeah, it's interesting. Auburn, this offense desperately needs a shot in the arm, after I think the disaster that has become Bo Nix there. And I think TJ Finley could be able to give it to them, his homecoming of sorts, going back to LSU, the school he played at for last year. If I'm remembering correctly, TJ Finley was awful when LSU and Auburn played a year ago. Maybe I have that back. No, yeah, Auburn won this game big last year down there on the Plains, but I had a lot of questions about this Brian Harsin program. And, Mike, thinking I was going to zag, I'm taking LSU here. I like them in this situation. Dari brings up the Mississippi State point. That game wasn't necessarily as close as it looked. Mississippi State had a long, late touchdown drive to pull that a little bit closer. So give me Ed Orgeron here in LSU. I don't love that it's at 3.5 points, but I hate Auburn more than that. So give me LSU here.
Connor says the Auburn offense needs a shot in the arm. Of course, one of the problems for Auburn has been Brian Harsin, a little averse to shots in the arm. That's been a little bit of an issue for Harsin as far as this time.
Ty Cobb did not like that one. Ty Cobb's selling his Coke stock right now.
That's good stuff there.
By the way, Dog Nation Daily listeners and viewers, 71% on the side of LSU on this. Dari, before I make my pick, let me ask a quick question. I have great respect for your gambling expertise. What does a team typically get on the point spread for being at home? What's the typical value of being at home? 3 points. This is a 3.5-point number, courtesy of our friends at BetUS. Does anybody feel comfortable with the idea that on a neutral field, LSU only being a 0.5 point better than Auburn? That's not something I can agree with when I look at the overall program strength for LSU. Not a perfect team. Man, Auburn's got a lot of problems. They have no wide receiver play whatsoever. They don't really have the dynamic defensive presence they've had in the past. And, you have to make the quarterback switch to TJ Finley. It's just something on the basis of Bo Nix struggles. But as Connor said, there's a lot of evidence for the majority of the time at LSU a year ago that Finley's obviously an imperfect quarterback. That's the reason why he's at Auburn instead of still there in Baton Rouge. Doesn't need to be more complicated than that. On a neutral field, I believe LSU is the better team than Auburn now. So the benefit of playing at home here right now there as well. I just think LSU's the play here. Auburn's heading towards a losing season. I'll take LSU minus the 3.5. That puts the flow on the side of LSU there as well. Or you want to go with the flow and take LSU?
I do not. I think where the line's at is pretty close. I think it's going to be pretty on the money when all the chips end up falling on the table. This is kind of like a pickup game. Both of these teams are trying to find their identity. Both of these teams have issues in different parts of their game and kind of all throughout the game on both sides of the ball. I love that this is a 9 p.m. night game. Death Valley's going to be rocking. Unbelievably tough plays to win. I think it's going to be a great game to watch. I can't wait to see it. I think it comes down to the very end of this game. To me, it feels like a field goal or less type of point scoring game. So since I think it's just going to be a win by 3 points or less, and this is at 3 and a hook, I'm going to take Auburn and the points in this game. I think it's going to be razor thin down to the wire. And remember, Auburn played not too long ago what I think is a pretty good Penn State team on the road, and they played them pretty well, and it kind of came down late, and they were in that game. LSU really hasn't played anyone like that. So, I think Auburn's going to hang around in this game.
Interesting stuff. Of course, over the years, Auburn and LSU have played some of the more oftentimes good, sometimes just weird, but some of the, the most talked about games in the SEC in any given season. A lot of times Auburn and LSU seem to team up to play a lot of those over the years.
And you also have the wild card in this game. Bo Nix gets benched and they put Finley in, and how that sparks this team. That's just a complete wild card that can flip the momentum in this game if something like that happens. So, I'm really intrigued to see how this game plays out.
Let's go with the flow presented by RS Andrews here today. We got more picks coming up in a moment, including a look at Georgia and Arkansas again before we're done. Let me also remind you to reach out to my friends at RS Andrews online at rsandrews.com. It's still warm outside. That means your air conditioning is still working pretty hard, especially at night. I can't sleep in a hot house. If your air conditioning unit, if you know it's on its last legs, if it's at the end of its life expectancy, get a little bit more life breathed into it. Go ahead and get that system tuned back up to factory fresh specs. Find RS Andrews online at rsandrews.com for your air conditioning, heating, plumbing, electric needs. And if the doorbell rings out of nowhere, you don't have to worry about that. RS Andrews just listen. Everything in the house is working the way that it's supposed to, even if you have unexpected rings on the doorbell with dogs barking and everything else. RS Andrews is the one to turn to for all of that there as well. By the way, whose house was that, by the way? Is that Jeff's?
Oh, no, that's where I'm at.
Oh, is that right? Okay, well, good for you, Dari. Nice to see you taking the pets with you on a nice little fall getaway there. All right, I am probably more excited about the next couple of minutes in our show than maybe anything else on the of the season thus far. Because I think you can make a case that in the entire history, certainly we've been doing this show, if not the history of college football all the way around, that UConn traveling to Nashville to take on Vanderbilt may be one of the worst games in college football history. And just simply for fun here, let's take a stab at this. According to our friends at BetUS, Vanderbilt, believe it or not, a team that's 62-0 to Georgia last week, lost 23-3 to East Tennessee State to open the season, is somehow a 14.5-point favorite against UConn on Saturday. Mike, what do you think about the Commodores and the Huskies? Have you ever covered either one of these two teams?
Not as a beat, no. I have been up to UConn for a basketball game, and it was.
Have you?
Oh yeah, it was pretty awesome. Actually, I was at the XL Center. Tennessee played up there one year.
For a men's game or a women's game?
That was a Bruce Pro game. That was the Bruce Pro game. That was a pretty fantastic event. Vanderbilt beat Colorado State earlier, and they held Stetson Bennett to 3 points in the second quarter. So there's something to build on. UConn is just they're awful. I'm going to take Vanderbilt and give the points because I think this is one of those games where Clark Lee's going to be looking for the right guys to put on the bus and the right guys to kick off. I mean, this is you got to make a statement if you're Vanderbilt. I mean, at some point, you've got to justify your football scholarship, and beating up on a bad team is the way to do that. So I'm going to take Vanderbilt.
Vanderbilt, Connecticut. Jeff, what do you think?
Yeah, this is the game I saw on the pick sheet where I was like, Brandon's just torturing us here. Like, he's just torturing us with this one. This is a leadership question for me, guys. I know Randy Edsall moved on from UConn earlier this year pretty quickly. Clark Lee certainly thinks he's building something at Vanderbilt, going to get his guys. I think Vanderbilt will do better when they settle with Ken Seals as their quarterback. But I don't know how in the world they get to 14.5 points on anybody, maybe even Bishop Sycamore University. This is one of those you just want to spit the ground as you say it. So I will end my time at the podium by saying I like Vanderbilt. I'm going to lay the points, and I think the Commodores will cover that massive 14.5 number. I think UConn will probably give them 7.
I got it, Jeff. I got to clap back on Steele there. I mean, the guy's not that bad.
That's what I mean. That's what I mean.
He's giving you a pawn. He's giving you a pawn, Jeff. Don't fall for that trap. Don't fall. The only thing that can make the Vanderbilt Connecticut pick worse is to be inundated by a bunch of puns.
See, that pick right there is the definition of a dad joke. Ty Cobb wearing a dad hat type joke right there. Man.
Connor, what do you think? By the way, Jeff, just real quick, who did you take again?
I'm laying the points. I'm taking Vandy. I think they'll get it done.
Boy, I love the confidence in Vanderbilt here. Connor, what do you think?
Vanderbilt team we saw a week ago was the worst SEC team I have ever seen in my life, and I'm sure I'm sure in Mike's life as well, which is much longer than mine. Vanderbilt team shouldn't be favored by 2 touchdowns over anybody. And UConn has been awful this year. They lost to the Holy Cross Crusaders at one point. They only lost by 2 to a pretty decent Wyoming team a week ago.
Decent Wyoming. Those words don't belong in the same sentence. Have you ever been to Wyoming?
Wyoming's a beautiful country.
If you're a dinosaur.
Wyoming's a beautiful country, Mike. Don't downplay it out there. Jackson Hole is a great place to go ski. Vanderbilt shouldn't be favored by 2 touchdowns, much less 14.5 points over anybody. Give me UConn here.
Yeah, so Dog Nation daily listeners and viewers going SEC on this as well. 61% do take Vanderbilt minus the points, which is kind of a funny sentence to even say. I'm looking at the UConn schedule thus far. I mean, 45-0 to Fresno State's fairly forgivable, just given the fact that, Fresno's kind of turned out to be okay. But Connor mentioned 38-28 losers to Holy Cross. I'm not even sure if we're allowed to call them Crusaders anymore. I don't even know if that's like does PC Police let us call them Crusaders anymore. But either way, Holy Cross 38-28 over UConn. They lost 49-0 to Purdue, and Purdue is average as grits. They lost 52-21 to the Troops. Army took them down. And then Connor said they played okay against Wyoming. The point here is I don't trust Vanderbilt minus 14.5 against anybody. I'll take UConn plus the 14.5 and just take a flyer on that, if nothing else. So I'll take the Huskies here. The flow, though, on the side of Vanderbilt. You want to go with the flow and take Vanderbilt, Dari?
Yeah, I'm going to go with the flow. I'm taking Vandy. I mean, I never thought I would take Vandy to cover 14.5 points. It's kind of crazy. But at the same time, it's against UConn, who's absolutely awful. I don't even think UConn will win a single game this year. So, Vandy should be able to win this game by 3 touchdowns.
Yeah, well, that's quite a statement all the way around there. Pretty interesting stuff. All right, we'll come back to the SEC before we're done with more on Georgia, Arkansas. But for now, the one game involving top 25 teams not in the SEC here this week and by the way, there's a lot of good national games this week that's kind of like ranked team against unranked team that I think are probably worth following. But the one game involving ranked opponents is Cincinnati, one of the darlings of the group of 5 level for the last couple of years, going to South Bend to take on Notre Dame. Of course, Notre Dame, fresh off a 41-13 win against Wisconsin last week at Soldier Field. And for the most part, the Bearcats have been riding high for most of the season there as well. In fact, they're actually favored on the road against Notre Dame on Saturday. Bearcats are 2-point favorites in South Bend. Mike, what do you think about Cincinnati and Notre Dame?
Yeah, as much as I want to take Cincinnati because I really like Luke Fickell and think he's a great coach and really had a lot of respect for the way Cincinnati played against Georgia and really thought they belonged in the playoff ahead of Notre Dame last year after Notre Dame lost 34-10 to Clemson. Notre Dame's got it going right now. And there's something about playing on a big stage. The Irish know how to perform in these situations. I know Connor's going to copy me and take Notre Dame. I got to take the Irish in South Bend. I mean, they hired away the Cincinnati defensive coordinator. That's a little bit of a winning edge. And I think Notre Dame might be sneaky good this year. Brian Kelly, a pretty good big game coach. I'll remind everyone, 2019, they beat Georgia on a neutral field. If that game is played at a neutral field, Sanford Stadium came alive the red LED lights, the 6 false starts. That was all home crowd. I'm taking the Irish in this one at home over Cincinnati.
Jeff, what do you think?
Yep. Mike brings up a Marcus Freeman point that I thought at least insight about the Cincinnati team, what they do well, what they don't do well, what the future first round, maybe a first round quarterback likes in the pocket and what frustrates him a little bit. And this is rare for me, guys. This is a Notre Dame team with some momentum. I actually learned this week that Brian Kelly is the all-time winningest coach in Notre Dame history. I didn't fathom that was possible. Mike brings up a lot of echoes there about big game coach. In a game like this, I just lean towards which team I think is operating better defensively. And then when you give me that Marcus Freeman edge there and Notre Dame with momentum. Now, I don't think that Cincinnati's going to turn the ball over 19 times like Graham Mertz in Wisconsin did. By the way, Connor, I have sold all my Graham Mertz stock. And
as you should.
That stuff's going down the road. Give me the Irish in this one, man. I think they'll win this one by about 7 points.
Connor, what do you think? A lot of Notre Dame here thus far.
I'm going to, Mike had me nailed to a T. I'm going to take Notre Dame here. The last 5 times Notre Dame has been an underdog dating back to 2010. Notre Dame is 5-0, all of those outright wins as well. I like what this Notre Dame team did, figuring out Wisconsin a week ago, making that game entertaining to watch, because the only time Wisconsin's entertaining to watch is when they are forced to throw the football. So give me Notre Dame here. I like this team at home. That Cincinnati team, I know they beat Indiana earlier in the year, but that was not an impressive game for them that day. So give me the Fighting Irish here. And I would point out the winner of this game, I think, actually has a really strong case as a potential playoff team, because after this game, these two teams combined play 0 ranked opponents the rest of the year.
So, Dog Nation Daily listeners and viewers inside of the Bearcats here, 62% on Cincinnati. They just don't like Notre Dame. I think the one thing you got to be really careful with is you see the score from a week ago, 41-13 over Wisconsin. I was on the wrong side of that. Won't mind telling you that. However, the actual statistical story is a lot different. Wisconsin actually outgained Notre Dame a week ago. They lost the game 41-13. So be careful thinking that Notre Dame proved too much in that spot against Wisconsin last week. And Connor's right. It wasn't a great game in Bloomington for Cincinnati, but it was a road win against a Power 5 opponent. And if you want to go back before the season started, I think we would have thought a little bit more of Indiana than we've kind of turned out to think, just based on the way they played thus far. That was supposed to be a big game for Cincinnati before the season kicked off. That's enough for me to take a flyer here on Cincinnati. We had guys mention a moment ago the fact that Marcus Freeman now works at Notre Dame. The truth is, I don't really see the Cincinnati defense skipping much of a beat here, bolstering claims it was Luke Fickell's defense to begin with, maybe not Marcus Freeman's. Notre Dame, maybe last week notwithstanding, not been a great defensive team with Freeman there thus far this season. Think Toledo, think Florida State, and all of that. So I think Cincinnati's the play here. 2-point favorite on the road. I take that pretty seriously. I'll go with the Bearcats. The flow, though, on the side of the Fighting Irish. Dar, you want to go with the flow and take Notre Dame as a home underdog?
Yeah, I'm going to take the Irish at home, being an underdog. I'm really looking forward to watching this game. It's going to be a great battle. I think if this game is played on a neutral site, Cincinnati's probably gets the win here. They're playing for all the marbles. Both of these teams, they're both trying to get their respect for college football playoffs. This is their marquee game right here. Notre Dame this whole season has played games close. They kind of find a way to scrap together a win, and that's what they're going to do here. I don't think it's going to be pretty, but they're just going to find a way to win.
We'll turn our attention now finally back to Georgia, Arkansas here, where the over-under is set at 48. Of course, last year in a 37-10 Georgia win, these two teams combined for 47 points there in last year's contest. What do you think this time around, Mike? We're going to go over or under the 48 for Georgia and Arkansas?
Yeah, I got to go under. I mean, the Georgia defense has scored in all 3 games in some capacity. All 4 games in some capacity. Georgia has not been able to run the ball with regularity. I know what the yards per carry say, but I know what my eyes say. So I see this. This is going to be a well-scouted game. Both coaching staffs know one another, and everyone's gotten amnesia and forgotten the 10-3 game against a Clemson team that's barely hanging on the top 25. So I'm going to go with the under in this game.
Jeff, what do you think? Over under 48.
Yeah, here's what I think. I think you said something earlier in our points, Brandon, where Kirby is not going to cash in a late score to rub it in and get the number against Sam. I see not so much question marks, but concerns with both quarterbacks and the health of the relative guys at the quarterback position. I think Sam has got a good idea of what he thinks Georgia will do and vice versa. That's why all these things to me matriculate for an easy call right here to go under.
Easy under so far, Connor. What do you see the spread? I mean, the total here.
Yeah, it's going to be a dangerous game for me. I'm taking Georgia with the points, but I'm also going to take the under here. In Georgia's last 11 games against ranked opponents, 9 of them have gone under. I like that again here. Jeff mentions KJ Jefferson dealing with the banged up knee there. Treylon Burks as well, who's a very good receiver for Arkansas. He's dealing with a little bit of an injury. And if both those guys are off, Arkansas is not going to be able to throw the ball in this game. If you're not able to throw the ball, you're certainly not going to be able to run the ball that well against this Georgia defense. So I like the under here.
Dog Nation Daily listeners and viewers like the under there as well. And Connor mentioned the number. I had that as well. Although I think from the Bear Chris Felica, it's going back to the start of the 2019 season. Games played home and neutral where that qualifies. 11 games, 9 games have gone under here for that spot for Georgia. I'm not really one to much want to argue against that. I do think this is a better Georgia offensive team than we've seen in that 2019-2020 season. But as someone who's been wrong on every side of the over-under thus far this year, I guess I'll take the safe play and take the under. I actually don't feel great about it. Dari, that puts the flow on the side of the under there too. You want to go with the flow and take the under?
Well, I was kind of going back and forth on this, but since you're going under, I'm going to go over. I think the game's going to be just barely get over. I think it's going to be really close to that 48 number. I think they're going to get the over. I think Georgia's going to be in somewhat control of this game. But I think Arkansas is going to find a way to score some touchdowns in this game and may get like 20 points, 20 or some points. I know Georgia's only given up like 5 points per game or something like that, but I think there's going to be like a turnover, a short field, or stuff like that they're going to have some things to work with. I think the game just goes over.
Boy, that's a very interesting prediction. Obviously, we're talking about Arkansas scoring more than some people think. I wonder what their individual team total might be set up for Saturday. But if you're talking about them scoring more points than some people might think, you're talking about a game that could feel a bit different in the second half than some Georgia fans think that might. And of course, I've got no problem with you fading me on my over-under play, just given how wrong I've been that for the entirety of this season. It should be a fascinating week's worth of games no matter what. And of course, we appreciate our friends from R.S. Andrews making it all possible. Find them online at rsandrews.com for your air conditioning, heating, plumbing, and electric needs. Story after story, they've been delivering smiles. They can deliver a smile for all of you there as well. Water heaters, electrical issues, air conditioning units. Start thinking about the winter time of year. We're going to be there before you know it. Make sure that furnace is ready to go. Obviously, R.S. Andrews can take care of you and all of that. rsandrews.com for a lot more. Appreciate BetUS for providing us the point spread data for today's games there as well. Check out BetUS.com. Use the promo code DN125 and get 125% initial deposit bonus when you sign up there. Use the promo code DN125, BetUS.com for more on that. To Connor, Jeff, Mike, Dari, best of luck with all your picks. To our audience who follows along and makes their own picks with us, best of luck to all of you there as well. Enjoy the football. We'll see you back here again next Friday for another edition of Go with the Flow, presented by R.S. Andrews. We'll talk to you then, everybody.